Chapter 5. A year after I was born, my mom decided she wanted to join the workforce. My dad would take care of me and go back to school. It suited him as he still struggled to identify a career for himself. And he would be with his baby girl, whom he loved very much. But the plan wasn't that simple, and soon he found himself in a cat and mouse game with his wife. She chose to join the Coast Guard, which, while admirable, seemed to give her the opportunity to escape domestic life. At 19, she took off for basic training in New Jersey. As if dad was a paparazzi and mom a famous actress, he followed her from city to city. He would be told no visitors while she was in Coast Guard training, and then suddenly she was off to another location. First, we moved to Massachusetts and then to Maine a few months later, but we couldn't seem to catch her. And love and lonely, dad would call her, but her phone would only ring and ring. She didn't even have the mercy of an answering machine to pick up. Despite the chase, we liked living in Maine. Dad found a group of friends, and I was the wild child running around, all smiles. One of my dad's friends brought over a dollhouse for me. It was plain but functional. The water ran in the sink, and the toilet flushed. The delicate furniture was small, even in my young hands. It was precious, and I wanted to protect it. I channeled all my energy towards not being clumsy, a trait that started rearing its ugly head. One day I decided to play a game which consisted of me running out the side door and then back in through the front door. I was going in fast circles and laughing the whole time until I tripped on the sill of the door frame and came crashing down, eyelid making contact with a rusty door hinge. I was rushed to the ER where they would put a patch over my injured eye. I looked like a pirate. To this day, I have a Frankenstein like scar under the arch of my left eyebrow, a few centimeters from my eyeball. This was one of many visible reminders of my messy life to come. We stayed in Maine for a couple of years, hovering near my mom's orbit. One day, my dad heard from her. She was going to get an abortion. He sat down the receiver and put head in his hands. He would drive her there. But as they drove, he broke the silence and begged her to keep the baby. I was 2 years old and needed a sibling. He would care for this baby, providing enough love for the both. Maybe he thought this anchor would finally keep her in one place, but she was a speedboat and we as light as acorns. My sister Jill was born in the spring of 1983. By Thanksgiving, mom had already left for New York to attend electronics specialist school. She was 21, showing high aptitude for math and science, no longer the shy girl my dad had met. In fact, she hadn't been for quite some time, we would come to find out. Men found her desirable, and she understood the power she held over them. She was having a string of affairs. When she came home for 2 short days over Christmas, Dad suggested she take me to the store. I looked at her shyly and heard her say, "I need alone time." She walked out the front door. The frosty air that washed in was somehow warmer than her presence. Mom would only come to see us a couple times over the next 6 months. She was reassigned to Chesapeake, Virginia, and we followed her one last time. Dad had a deep well of love for her, lowering the bucket again and again, but it would soon come back up, filled with mud and little stones. This sludge. Love that felt like sludge. I was almost 4 years old and had just learned how to do cartwheels. I was sure my dad would be beside himself with excitement to watch me. After calling his name several times, I realized he wasn't listening. I sat down quietly in the middle of the living room, wanting to be polite, but also notice. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Like a dreamy figure of a man, Dad brushed past me, his short locks alight from the rays. He paced between the kitchen and the bedroom in the back of the house, squeezing milk onto his wrist to test the warmth. He had a baby to take care of. My mom was nowhere to be found. Distracted and exhausted, he stepped right over me. Sometime later, I was excited. Mom was coming home. I ran at breakneck speed to see her, but I tripped on a crack in the sidewalk and fell hard on my right knee. Blood ran freely down my leg and into my sneaker. It didn't hurt much though, and I did a hop, skip, drag combination home. I saw the repulsed look on her face. She put a couple of band-aids over a cut that needed stitches. It took a long time for the cut to heal. It probably didn't help that I picked at it constantly. The new year of 1985 brought new secrets to the surface. Dad found out that mom had an abortion about a year earlier during one of the long spells of us not seeing her, so he knew it wasn't his. She admitted to having affairs with men while in New York, which she could not deny because love letters were showing up at the house. So this still did not break the camel's back. For the next 6 months, mom was around more, but she was drinking at home or going to bars quite frequently. She would pick us up from daycare visibly buzzed, if she remembered to pick us up at all. One day, she burned the back of my sister's hand with an iron, not on accident. She tried to say that Jill knocked it over and burned herself, but the scar on my sister's hand looked deliberate, the line sharp, like when someone uses an iron to make a grilled cheese sandwich in a comedy movie. I'm not sure if it was alcohol induced, her mean streak surfacing, on both. My dad still stood by her side. He stayed until she left us a couple of months later, my fifth birthday right around the corner. She left so quietly this time, offering no breadcrumbs to follow. So we packed up our meager belongings and headed back to the place where I had been born. All right, so there's a lot going on here. I think the thing I wanted to point out about this chapter, again, I have so many spoiler alerts here. Having conversations with my dad later in my life, in my 20s, he shared a lot with me, and I'll get to that later. But he did talk to me about this. This chapter is a combination of him sharing information about her, my aunt sharing, and apparently a lot of people knew about this, but I was very protected from it. I just have these little memories, the stuff that I talk about, the hand wanting to do cartwheels and treasuring the dollhouse. I remember those things. Those are things I remember. The stuff that was happening in the background, the adult stuff, I obviously didn't know that was happening. I have no memory of that. But I do remember what happened to my sister's hand, and that was something she never forgot either. All right, on to the next.